Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to our Q&A with Sid, our Director of Robotics Artificial Intelligence here at Amazon. So, hi Sid, how are you?
Hello, Nia. It's good to see you. I haven't seen you in almost 10 minutes, so it's
I know, right?
great to chat again.
Yep. Really looking forward to this conversation. And so, how about we just jump right in?
Sure.
Okay. So, question for you, Sid. How did you decide you wanted to become a roboticist? And what do you think you like most about robotics? Like, what skills do you have that you feel like have helped you most in robotics?
With respect to the skills, I'm still like thinking about that myself. Every day is a discovery. One of the things, I've been a professor for 15 years or something like that now. One of the things that I see in resumes or statements from undergrads or grad students is they often start with, when I was 6 years old, I knew I wanted to be a roboticist, and here I am applying for grad school. And I 100% know that's probably not true. I mean, it may be true. So I'm a very accidental roboticist. I was ready to do a PhD in fluid mechanics at Cornell or in applied mathematics at Caltech when the director then of the Robotics Institute at Carnegie Mellon just sort of showed up at my alma mater, and he actually came home for dinner. My father was the dean there, and he said, "You should do robotics." And I said, "What's that?" Yes, I like from movies. I've seen these movies, and so I applied. And to my shock, I got in. And then there was a decision that I had to make between like going to do fluid mechanics at Cornell and going to do a PhD in robotics. And I remember my father, who's a distinguished professor, the real Professor Srinivasa, telling me, sitting me down and telling me, son, what the future is, it's turbines. It's not robots, it's turbines. And to this day, I make fun of him for saying that, but I think I've been very accidental in terms of what I've done as a roboticist. But coming back to your point of like what skills are critical, I think I was very lucky in just sort of fortunately accumulating some of the skills that were useful. I started programming at a very young age. We got an IBM PC XT, with the one with the 500 quarter floppy drives at
Oh,
home.
yeah.
And I was playing video games on it. And then I decided to write my own video games. And that taught me a lot about just computational geometry, like perspective, mathematics, algorithms, and things like that. And I think that was really important that I could write code like I speak language. I think the other one was I've always enjoyed tinkering. I'm comfortable sort of welding stuff or building stuff or breaking stuff, mostly breaking stuff, and not being able to put them back together. And I think a combination of just like being able to tinker and having a sort of an algorithmic mindset and being comfortable with computers has been successful. I'm actually going to flip this to you, but like, what about you? What got you into robotics?
So, that's really interesting because, I started at Amazon in January, as you know, being the person who hired me here. And, before then, I spent 20 years in the aerospace industry, and I've always just been very passionate about working on things that really matter. And particularly, like, I'm hugely passionate about autonomy and, automation and just kind of generally making things function without a human immediately directing it in a way that's very helpful to humans. And so for me, like I've worked across the product lifecycle for a variety of products, primarily space-based, satellite-based, from a spacecraft autonomy perspective. And I've had the opportunity to work on and deploy, work a lot of missions, do a lot of really great things. And I'm super excited to have the opportunity to innovate faster here at Amazon. And for me, robotics is an extension. It's under the umbrella of autonomy, like just kind of that general fundamental kind of pressing forward with respect to enabling things to function without a human immediately having to direct it to in a way that's hugely helpful and works alongside humans. And then, of course, robots are just super cool. Like, I'm a huge fan of Isaac Asimov in the robot series. And so I've always been a big believer in just kind of following my heart. And, right now my heart is here. So,
Awesome. Yeah, with respect to like science fiction and movies, like same here, but I'm the one who points out to my kids, like, that robot's not
right,
possible. That's just not gonna
right.
happen. That breaks
Suspension
physics.
of disbelief is hard.
But some of those robots are actually really inspiring and exciting. And I think that's something for me that I think I've been incredibly fortunate um, to be working and be paid to work on something that I just absolutely love doing. Like, I love robots. It's just, and for the past 21 years, I have woken up every morning like loving robots as much, if not more. And it's hard. It's hard to explain why it's hard. We tend to anthropomorphize and we say, "Ah, I can pick up a coffee mug. Surely a robot can pick up a coffee mug." But I think it also helps us understand something about ourselves, like why do we do what we do and how we do it. And I think it's been super useful, and particularly also for me, like having kids and watching them grow and watching them become better at manipulating and locomoting than my robots have ever been. I think it's certainly been interesting to watch that journey even unfolding at a very personal scale.
Yeah. So, Sid, I have to follow up. I have to ask you, even though I'm pretty sure I already know the answer based on prior discussion. Um, what is your favorite video game, and do you still play video games? Since you mentioned that as kind of a means for getting into coding.
I have to give the. I'm trying to think of like a cool, like my favorite video game is something like incredibly like thoughtful, like Myst. I used to play Myst. I actually did used to play Myst, but I grew up. I was in grad school when I started playing video games like more seriously, and I would say I spent a pretty decent percentage of my PhD playing video games, not doing my PhD, and with a cohort of people who are all incredibly successful now. So clearly something worked. I played a lot of Counter Strike growing up. And it's a first-person game, and I really enjoyed it. But I think that one of the nice things about that video game is that it also, like, in general, helps you with hand-eye coordination. Like, I really love playing sports. I play tennis now. I used to play squash. I run a lot, and my excuse for playing video games was that it helped me in my hand-eye coordination. But I don't know. It's rather tenuous. What about you? Did you play video games growing up, or?
So actually, a story that, is near and dear to my heart is that when I was a kid, my brother loved video games. And so my parents would give us like 30 minutes of video game time each over the summer. And we would stack our video game time to be able to try and like beat like something like Mega Man or something like that. And I was horrible. I was so bad at those games. And so I would go first, then my sister would go, then my brother would go, like kind of the ringer, like the anchor, but the one game that to this day I still love and still play is Tetris. And so like that was my game. And occasionally I'll drop into, other just kind of like social games because someone in my family's playing just as a means for connection. But Tetris is the only game that I've ever really loved to play. So,
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I played a lot of Tetris too, and my IBM PC had a turbo button, and you press the turbo button and things would go like 10 times faster. And that used to be my favorite joke when my friends would be playing Tetris and they would be beating me. I would just sort of sneakily press the turbo button and make all the blocks fall. But yeah, there's
yeah.
somehow, you know, this sort of combinatorial optimization, a mathematically hard problem somehow seems to be rather easy and effortless for humans, which is again kind of interesting.
Yeah. Okay, great. So let's see. So Sid, so we've talked about how you got into robotics. Can you talk a bit about how your career has evolved over time?
Um, I think I owe a lot of my robotics like the way I think about robots to a couple of things, right? Like one is I started working on robots in 1999. This is a very long time ago, almost half my life. And I think I started at the Robotics Institute at Carnegie Mellon, and it was, we didn't know it back then, but it was really the birth of a lot of really exciting and interesting things happening. Like working on self-driving cars with the Grand Challenge and Urban Challenge. I built humanoids for the DARPA Robotics Challenge, a whole bunch of other things, and I sort of really enjoyed that time because it forced us to be inventors, it forced us to be entrepreneurs, it forced us to, I mean, there's something incredibly terrifying about being a young grad student and having to go participate in a big competition where, where millions of dollars were at stake. And it really clarified our mind on working backwards and thinking very carefully about all the technical choices that needed to be made to build a product. Of course, we were not building products for money back then, but I think it helped us have a very strong sort of systems thinking. And I think that systems thinking of understanding not just how a single piece works, but how all of these pieces fit together, and really anticipating what the issues might be when you fit these pieces together, as something that I've learned over time. And actually, what I have are the scars of having done it wrong. And whenever I see a new problem, I sort of point to those scars and say, hey, we should probably not do that because I did it and this horrible thing happened. And I think I've always been very passionate about, there's this, we made these promises in robotics. This is where the hype is. It's really high, and we've only delivered a fraction of those promises, right? We can debate what that fraction is, but it's certainly like less than one. And so I feel very responsible for that gap, and I've always very much felt like I need to do whatever it takes to build something that has sort of real deep impact. I've always also been a very reluctant academic. Like I've been a professor for a while. I love being a professor because I love teaching, but I also really strive for impact and wanting to make sure that it's impactful. I think along the way, I was part of an early stage company called Berkshire Grey that is now sort of publicly traded. And that journey was also amazing. We started off with 4 people, and now I don't know how many people that company has. But I think that journey of being able to do it all, right? Like I love writing code, I love building robots, I love welding metal, I love proving theorems. But the opportunity to do it all and to really align against metrics and do it in a way such that you're able to bring meaningful change has always been really exciting for me.
Yeah. Congratulations, by the way, on Berkshire Grey.
Thank you. It feels completely alien and odd, but my dad keeps calling me every once in a while and complaining about why the stock price is so low. So and also why he doesn't get his Amazon packages on time. So really, I'm doing all of this for my kids, my wife, and my dad, I guess, for persistently disappointed with me.
I definitely get the calls since I started working here about the packages and and why they don't, why they come when they come, I'll just say. So okay, so let's talk about robotics AI at Amazon. So what specifically does robotics AI do?
Yeah, so I own autonomous manipulation and autonomous mobility in Amazon's buildings. Our goal is to improve our associates' experience by developing technology and robots that work with and around people. By eliminating human tasks that involve repetitive lifting, stacking, turning, we can really, I think, elevate our employees to engage in higher level tasks that require common sense and understanding and actual inference that robots are not very good at. And this was I must say, just like I spent several months talking to you about why you should come and think about joining Amazon. likewise, it was a big decision for me. I just um, finished up with Berkshire Grey, and I was just being a professor, just happy being a professor. And I did get a call from a bunch of places about joining and being part of their efforts. And I asked them all sort of one question: why robots? Why do you need robots? All I know how to do is build robots, and that's all I want to do. So why do you need robots? And I think I found the answers from several of the others very tenuous, right? Which is, we want to solve AI, whatever that means, like dot 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 robots. And I think Amazon was, to me, one of the few places where there was just this very meaningful connection between robots and and what the business value for the company was, and how we could really improve our associates' experience. And I think one thing I also really believe in is that smart people will come up with answers to questions, but it's really the questions that matter. And one of the nice things about being at Amazon is that I get to understand what the questions are, right? And I get to frame the correct questions that I can then sort of unleash upon amazing, brilliant people like you to answer. But I think that what's really rewarding about engaging with the industry, starting your own company, is that you get to know what the real questions are, right? That are meaningful, that are tangible, and then you can take them away. Like those questions stay with you forever, no matter what you do and no matter where you go.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just want to echo a couple of things that you said. Like one thing that you said previously, just with respect to like really learning from, the times that you make mistakes, or, the times when things don't go quite right. Like those are some of the greatest lessons that inform how you do things, in the future. And then also just the opportunity to help people to like really obsess over our customers, meet our customers' needs, and solve some very real challenges. Like that actually need to be solved in order to continue to meet our customers' needs, and just kind of like finding the way to truly help people here is something that is a huge attractor to me, and that I'm excited for the opportunity that being an RAI presents to do that. Um,
Awesome. Yeah,
okay.
and I think that one thing I'd also say is that like customer obsession is certainly my favorite leadership principle at Amazon. When I joined Amazon, I heard about all these leadership principles, and initially I was like, oh, sure, it's like more words.
Yeah.
But I think being at Amazon has reinforced how important it is. They help provide a common scaffolding for the language that we all know internally that we should use. But also, I think actions matter louder than words, right? I think Amazon is one of those places where we are truly obsessed about our customers. We want to improve their experience. It's a very simple goal, but I think it's a goal that underneath it has like so much complexity in it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, agreed. And I think customer obsession is probably my favorite leadership principle as well. That or think big. Uh, yeah. Okay. So if there was one current hurdle in robotics, ideally, but answer however you choose, that could get completely solved today, what would you choose?
Oh my. All right. So many hurdles. My life is filled with hurdles. Um, let me think a little bit broader about it. I think and then I'm gonna whenever I see these, I'm gonna put it back to you. So keep it processing in the back of your head. Um, I think I do strongly believe that we should have much greater access to robots and AI. I think that I feel very fortunate that I studied at the best place in the world to do robotics. I worked at some of the top schools, the top companies, um, but I do feel um, very fortunate to have done that. And when I was young, I was a little Sid. I never got to see a robot because that just there was no potential, there was no scope for doing that. So I think when the next little Sid or little Mia grows up, I do want them to have far greater access to robotics and AI and tools that can empower them to really like do whatever they want to do with this technology. I do believe that we are mere sort of placeholders for the great things that our future generations will do to make sure we don't screw things up. But I think it's our duty to make sure that the future generation has all the access that they need such that they can really understand what the nitty gritty of robotics is. So I think really the biggest hurdle right now is democratization of robotics and making sure that the technology as well as the opportunities are available to everyone around the world such that everybody has an equal opportunity to innovate. What about
Yeah.
you?
Okay, so yeah, I resonate 100% with everything that you said, and I know this is something that we're both passionate about. Like, I'm hugely passionate about lowering the barrier of entry for understanding topics like artificial intelligence and robotics, and I genuinely believe that through lowering the barrier of entry, like, it allows to increase inclusion and diversity of thought, and truly be able to allow us to solve some of the most challenging problems, like technically. Um, Optimally and most efficiently. And that leads me directly to, like, what for me is the biggest barrier is just helping people to understand human awareness kind of surrounding the realities of artificial intelligence. We've got all these great science fiction movies and books, and the most common question that I get asked when people find that I work in AI, like, over decades, has been, are you going to build Skynet? It's like, is Terminator going to be a thing? And kind of questions like that. And so, like, truly increasing awareness surrounding the reality of what artificial intelligence is for the general population, like understanding that, what's happening now is analogous to what happened during the Industrial Revolution, and that, people are genuinely happier, some of the technology on the other side of the Industrial Revolution than before. And just trying to find a way to make sure that we move forward in a way such that people have awareness, have the education, like, we're being inclusive so that what we're building, like, is truly able to better our society and just generally help people.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think also that narrative needs to go beyond us to our leaders, right? Like I don't think I think robotics is hard. I think we all need to accept and acknowledge that it's hard, and we need to really open lower the barriers and open the doors so that everybody can access them.
And I definitely hear you there. Okay. So so how have you been able to transition? So you're a very, very strong science leader. So how have you been able to transition from a science leader to being an effective product leader?
Yeah, that's been quite a journey, I must say. And it's I must be I'll also say that it continues to be a journey. I think I continue to evolve as a scientist, and I continue to evolve as someone who's building products, and I think I continue to evolve as a leader and a manager and of an organization. And I think like growing any muscle, it requires a lot of work and it's painful. It does hurt, and also we have to accept that when some muscles grow, others will naturally atrophy, and we have to just be accepting of that. I think a few things. One is I do very passionately care about building products. I'm very much a nails person rather than a hammer person. Like I like to work backwards from a nail, a solution, and I am very, very obsessed with doing whatever it takes to solve the problem. And honestly, if you can do it without robots, that is great. There's this. I'm sure that other fields have this too, but there's a funny quote which says, if you have a problem and you add a robot to it, now you have two problems. I totally, completely believe that. I think we sometimes tend to complexify when really what we need to be doing is simplifying. Um, and I think and the other thing I would say is that, like, you have to genuinely believe in wanting to build products for the sake of building products and not for anything else. And I think I've realized more and more, possibly as I've gotten older and more gray hair, that, like, unless I don't truly believe in something, I just don't do it. And I wish I could tell my younger self that, like, it's just that don't really believe in the trappings, but just like do what you like doing. I know this sounds all very, very hollow, coming from a tenured professor who has a job for life. But I do believe that that's definitely true. I think one other thing is just, there's a lot that goes into building a product that is not science. I think a lot of startup founders, or a lot of, even technologists that I work with say, "Oh, I got this cool tool, cool idea, cool tool. We should do it." And it's really about like the what, why, where, when, how. Like, you could build a flying car and nobody might want it, right? Honestly, like, history is strewn with such examples of things that nobody wants, even though it is technically really, really hard to create. So I think I love working with, the finance teams. I love diving deep into finance. I love diving deep into the product space. I love thinking about requirements. I love thinking about safety. I love thinking about working with PR, HR, legal, all of those, just to understand what and there is a science to it, right? There is just this really wonderful science to thinking about how all of that happens. So I think I've enjoyed that. I've made numerous mistakes and continue to make numerous mistakes, both as a scientist, as a manager, and as somebody who owns products that need to work. But I think, the bottom line is that you have to really enjoy it. And if the shoe doesn't fit, you shouldn't try to stick it in. I think in general, like, you'll realize at some point that, like, you love doing X or love doing Y. One other thing I would say is that I've always been very single-minded in what I've done. And that involves saying no to a lot more things that I say yes to. I do very few things, actually. But whatever I do, I try to do with as much single-threadedness and dedication as possible, so that it doesn't also come in the way of my life. Right? Like, I love to cook, I love to play sports, I love to hang out with my family, I love to have my weekends for myself. I love to think, and I think being able to find time for all the things that you love is really, really important, in addition to the work that you're doing.
Yeah, agreed. And yeah, no, I especially just want to highlight the kind of, to simplify it. Robotics can be a hammer, but not everything's a nail. And this is something that I would say pretty frequently in kind of like my old job as well. It's like everything, like AI can be a hammer, but not everything's a nail. And so like I kind of resonate with like kind of the right solution for the right problem. And just kind of especially kind of like in trying to meet the customer's needs and push product. So
I think
okay.
one other thing that I would recommend to people, if they were interested in, uh, being a product leader or being a science leader, is, and this is my own personal suggestion, I wouldn't recommend this to everybody, is, um, put yourself in a situation where your failure has material consequences. Whether you're a professor or whether you're, a product leader. Otherwise, you're just dabbling. And I've always rejected dabbling, because I've always wanted to be in situations where the work that I did had real consequences, and, whether if it succeeded or if it failed, and that somehow really sharpens me and gets me excited about doing it. And so I don't particularly, while it's nice to have some safety nets, I do also think that we should, take the leap of faith, and do something that whose success or failure has material consequences.
Yeah. Okay, great. So Sid, where do you generally get your ideas to develop new solutions? Like, where do you get those ideas from?
Um, that's a great question. Um, I think I love two things. One is, observing the world, and the other one is like trying to explain things. Like, I love explaining things to my kids. I love explaining things. And I love teaching. And I think the act of teaching and the act of, explaining really forces you to ask the, sort of the five whys. Like, why is this happening? Why is this happening again? Why is that happening? And on and on. I'm very curious. Like, I love reading about various things, and also, I think robotics is one of those things where um, you watch the world behave and you try to ask, okay, like why is it behaving like the way it's behaving, and how do I think about it clearly? So in many ways, it is a very descriptive science. In that, when I look at a robot picking up a coffee mug, and I write prove a theorem and write an algorithm and build a robot that picks up a coffee mug. In some ways, I am explaining using the language that is available to me how a coffee mug is picked up. And so it is in a way, being able to write down, like, just like a painting is a way to, like, being able to capture and render reality in some other form. Or coding is about rendering an idea in the coding language. So I enjoy doing that. And I think it's also, I love listening to people, particularly subject matter experts, in any subject matter, right? I think that's why I really enjoyed talking to our associates at our fulfillment centers, talking to the GMs, talking to the people, the boots on the ground, and asking them, like, oh, hey, what's up? Like, how can I help? And I think, like, also to draw an academic analogy, one of the projects that I work on as a professor at the University of Washington is on a robot that can help feed people with upper extremity disabilities. And the reason I started working on that problem was because I visited the Rehab Institute of Chicago. It's now called the Ability Lab. And I just asked people, like, what can I do that can make your life, like, that can at least, like, attempt to make your life better? And the top request from all of them was that they just wanted to be able to eat by themselves and not have to be fed by a caregiver. And so I was like, okay, I'll do that. That sounds meaningful and important, and I'm sure it's challenging. And so why not? Like, I think being able to really interact closely with your customers and ask them, like, what do you want? Um, I think we often as technologists have this hubris of, like, you will want what I give you. And that may be true in many cases. Obviously, the horse versus car analogy and all this, the universe is replete with analogies of people not being able to articulate what they want. But I think that is really disrespecting the customer. Just because it's true once doesn't mean it's true all the time. And history has shown that, like, we've invented so many things that we think are useful but are not. So I think talking to our customers has been really, really, really valuable. I'm going to throw that back at you too. That's a good question for you because you do brilliant things. How do you do them? Where is your
Um,
inspiration?
oh gosh. So I said think big was my favorite leadership principle, and so I think of myself as someone who doesn't just think as outside the box, but I exist outside of the box. And so like I do a lot of I'm kind of very thoughtful, and I try to be very observant, and I try to listen a lot, and I try to draw analogies between experiences. I try to leverage some of my experiences that might be unique from my perspective. I like particularly coming from aerospace, and defense, and now being in robotics, just kind of leveraging like my past experience and bringing kind of that new like diversity of thought in many ways, to robotics now. I I also just super passionate about like kind of like the fundamentals, just kind of like first principles, and just kind of like breaking things down um, to fundamental problems to solve. And so like for example, like when I first started out, I didn't know anything about controls theory. Um, but I did know about intelligent agents and just kind of like the importance in AI of being able to perceive your environment, the ability to act on your environment, the ability to make decisions, to have some kind of reasoning engine. And when I first started learning about controls on the job, like it was completely analogous to me to how for controllers, like you have to define your environment, you have to create some kind of mathematical model for your environment, and you have to be able to perceive, you have to have sensors, you have to have actuators, you have to have some kind of like reasoning engine in some sense. And so like a lot of my ideas come from drawing analogies based on my experience. So seeing something new that I might not have depth in or be expert in, and kind of relating it to something that I do have depth in, and just kind of looking at it through a different lens. And I feel like that's been effective for me, in at least a couple of instances, like in my career. And but yeah, like generally for me, it's like I like there is no box, like there's no box that's controls, that's AI, that's robotics, like there's just a whole bunch of experiences, you know, and you can just kind of apply kind of these different fundamental principles to anything really, and just kind of figuring out different perspectives of how to do that.
Makes sense. Cool.
Cool. So okay, so one that I think is super critical that we cover is, what advice do you have for people interested in starting a career in AI and robotics today? So you've given some anecdotes that I think are hugely helpful and that were even like very useful for me to hear, but just, generally, like what advice do you have to give for folks who might be listening today?
First of all, I would say you should do it. Stop what you're doing and work on robots. But I think one thing I would say is robotics is still at its infancy. And this is both a blessing and a curse, more a blessing. Unlike other fields that require, tens of years of work to like perfect how to use an instrument or perfect how to develop techniques or even learn the language by which you can describe problems and solutions. The textbooks for robotics have yet to be written. There are a few. We'll all write some, but those haven't yet been written. And so I think the barrier to entry for robotics is really low, particularly if you are in sort of adjacent fields, right? Like for example, case in point, right? Because really it is, like you said, a combination, a beautiful dance of so many different components that need to come together, and so many different disciplines. And so I think my recommendation, like, again, I'll go back to the point I made about like do something that like puts you in a state where your work is relevant. If you're an undergrad or a grad student, I would recommend that you go find an internship in a place where robotics is actually the core business. Not robotics is something cool and fancy to have, but like robotics is actually material for the core business. And like go through that experience, like live that experience, be put through the fire of actually having to deliver something that matters. I think a lot of people who talk a lot about robotics often haven't experienced the fire of like production and delivery, and I think there's a lot of clarity that comes with that. I think for people who are working on sort of recreational robotics, like if you're a hobbyist, this is an incredibly wonderful opportunity to work on robots because just of the huge Cambrian explosion of robotics tools that are available. For example, like AWS has a whole bunch of tools, for example, like Deep Racer or even SageMaker tools for being able to explore AI and robotics. Or even, my own sort of UW lab, we have these little musher cars, 1/12 size race cars, we use for teaching and education. So I think really being able to be very grounded and dive deep into solving something is important, because one thing that we often get misled by is we look at YouTube videos of robots and we think, it's all solved. Like everything's solved. Like surely this thing can like do a backflip. So why can't we do anything else? And I think the challenge is that it's not the one time that it does the backflip, but the 50 million times that it doesn't, and it needs to do. And that's what I find the most fascinating is every time if you watch high-speed video of people picking up a coffee mug, you're just fumbling all the time, right? We're just touching, we're failing, we're making single contact, and we're taking off the contact. And so it is really about closing the loop and like figuring out what to do when things go wrong. That is the most critical aspect of robotics. Like when things go right, the YouTube video, it's easy to do. But taking something from like 80% to 96%, where you're systematically and methodically addressing all the things that go wrong, like that's the most important learning for somebody to get. And I think that's where the people, the real roboticists, like get their most joy in taking something from 80 to 95, 96%. And I think you should really embrace the embrace the suck and embrace the process and really commit to doing that.
Excellent. Thanks, Sid. So final question, and I'm going to just mention briefly before we jump into the final question, I'll mention again after that we do have another panel coming up after this. And so please do stay on. There's a panel that's going to be it's going to be featuring Amazon recruiters, and they're going to be discussing career opportunities. So if you're interested in working in robotics, they're going to be talking about Amazon teams that work in robotics and career opportunities with those teams. So please do stay on after the question. So, okay, so final question. Amazon just added a new leadership principle, and it's surrounding being Earth's best employer. And I'm just going to go ahead and read it because it is relatively new and it's really important that we kind of state it as is. So the leadership principle reads, leaders work every day to create a safer, more productive, higher performing, more diverse, and more just work environment. They lead with empathy, have fun at work, and make it easy for others to have fun. Leaders ask themselves, are my fellow employees growing? Are they empowered? Are they ready for what's next? Leaders have a vision for and commitment to their employees' personal successes, whether that be at Amazon or elsewhere. So I'm hugely interested in your thoughts. Can you elaborate on what this leadership principle means to you?
So first of all, thank you so much for reading out the leadership principle. We're a writing culture, and we take a lot of pride in making sure that we articulate clearly all the words. So I think thank you for doing that. Um, and this is my personal take on it, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it too. I think as leaders, we really owe it to our employees to strive to be Earth's best employer. And I think one of the things I've realized, being a leader and having a team that's now spread across, all over the world, has been that like we all look at the world through really sort of very, very different lenses, and these lenses are shaped, sharpened, scarred by our own life experiences. And I think it's very important to understand and acknowledge that, and to evolve our own lenses to appreciate that. Right? I think that's been the biggest, and honestly, that's been a big growth opportunity for me, to accept and acknowledge that the world is different through everybody's. We're all looking at the same elephant, but we see it in different ways, and it's important that we do see it in different ways. We have a great diversity of views, and it's important that all those views are included in the conversations that we're having around what we need to do. And that's not easy because sharing a common vocabulary, all of that is really, really important. I think one personal experience for me is that I absolutely love robots, and I would work on robots. Like I just enjoy so much the challenges that come with working with robots, and it's taken me honestly a while to understand and appreciate that sometimes people who I work with very closely may love things other than robots. And it took me a while to understand. I was like, "What? You don't love robots? Like, come on, it's robots. Like, what robots? Why do you want to work on anything else?" But I think that's super important. Um, but I think, like, very, very adjacent to that is and I do strongly believe in, strong opinions that are held loosely, and it's important to understand and evolve them. And this is all I think a large part of it is acknowledging that this is a principle that we need to focus on, and having mechanisms, not just good intentions, but building mechanisms such that we can actually enact these effectively. So I'll sort of throw it over to you.
Okay, so no, that was really great. That's hard to follow. I think for me, this leadership principle truly means just leading with empathy, which is something I'm very passionate about. Leading with empathy and just acknowledging that different people have different experiences, and just trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes to be able to at least acknowledge, if not really understand those experiences, and and truly just moving forward in a way such that we can kind of look at the available population, that represents our customer space, and just kind of note that, like, looking at the kind of breakdown of the available population, versus, the population that we have, building building robots, working in AI, and just kind of note the discrepancy and try to find the path to help to enable kind of greater diversity, greater equity, greater inclusion, in the fields, in these highly technical fields, in order to make us better as a whole, as a company, as a society, as the world. And so that's what this leadership principle means to me. And, I'm super, excited for the future.
Thank you.
So, Sid, is there anything that you want to add before we wrap this up?
Um, no, I'm all set. Thank you so much for this conversation. I really enjoyed it. I know, as you said, there's a short panel that is going to be there with our recruiters after this. So I'm really looking forward to that. But yeah, it's been a blast, and we should
Yeah.
do more of these. It would be
Yes.
so much fun.
I know this is fun. Yeah, thanks so much, Sid. And yes, just to keep emphasizing it, please stay on. There is going to be a short panel, like with the recruiters, who can give you really good, specific information about opportunities to work on Amazon teams and robotics. So thank you, Sid, for the conversation. This was great.
Thank you.